Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So here I want to cover my Module 29 Paladin Justicar build. There's a build document linked below, and you can see with the build we'll get over 102,000 item level, which is actually like 7,000 item level higher than my previous build. Just the stats pretty much stay the same. Now, first of all, we will cover like a survivability tank build where the purpose is to just maximize that survivability. So you can comfortably beat content surviving the onslaught of all those enemies. However, particularly towards endgame, it can be a lot more optimal to switch to team support bonuses, particularly ones to boost the team's damage. But you will do this when you are more comfortable with the content. Like whenever I run into new content that I'm completely clueless about and I don't know the mechanics, then it's always better to stack as much survivability as possible so I can actually survive some unpredictable hits, and thus you learn the patterns and you end up taking a lot less damage over time. And then, as per the later section in this build, group optimization, you can switch a lot of different things to improve your team's damage output. This document will be linked below so you can access it for yourself and follow step by step. But let's go through it in video format and give some further explanations where the document will lack. There'll be timestamps on the playbar below where you can skip to any section you're most interested in. And the very first thing will undoubtedly be power setup. The most important part to get right, make sure you're using the correct abilities. And this setup, again, as per the previous module, has not changed for me. This is what I recommend using, particularly if you're a newer tank. You've got your shielding strike there for the stamina regen, with Radiant Slam as a bit of a gap closer. You can definitely have Ode Strike there with the increased threat and also having a bit of a multi-target arc effect with that too. But in most cases in multi-target, you're too busy running around, you don't cast at-wills. In counter powers, you got that Smite combined with Divine Challenger to make it place you on top of the threat list, along with dealing a whole bunch of damage, which gives you then a lot of threat with that too. You've got like Absolution to decrease the damage you take. You want to use this at like situations where you know you're going to take big hits. Can take time to learn the mechanics of when the optimal time is to use it, but yeah, you can also just not be too fussed with that and just cast it when it's off cooldown. And then Binding Oath, that's just for the stamina regen. Again, in most cases you can just cast it when it's off cooldown. It also deals a bunch of damage to enemies who attack you. Be aware of different abilities you can use, like in multi-target, Burning Light can be great here for that extra stun effect when you first jump into a group of enemies. And then like Sacred Weapon can be useful too, particularly in boss fights for some extra threat. If you say didn't need the survivability from this, you also get a bit of extra stamina regen from here too. Daily powers, it's Divine Judgment at the beginning of a boss fight, just to make sure the enemy's attacking you, because damage equals threat. So deals a ton of damage, so that helps with that, combined with say a bonus of Manticore's Bite, where you deal a whole bunch of damage equal to half of your hit points, and then yeah, you gain an absolute ton of threat with that. But later on in the fight, maybe you want to use Divine Protector to give you a bunch of damage resistance when you have the Shield of the Gods feat combined with that, along with making sure your awareness is maxed out. The class features here, we've got that Divine Challenger, we need it for Smite, and then we've got Aura of Valor. This will massively reduce the threat of your party members, and so we'll make sure that the enemies are attacking you and not your allies. Now, when you get comfortable with the threat level of the groups you play with and you can time your abilities well, you can absolutely switch this over to some other aura like extra crit strike here or extra defense for your party members there, or even Aura of Vengeance for a bit of extra damage for yourself. The feats, I definitely recommend just all the top ones here. There's optionally to use like Sheltering Light if you want to like support the healer to heal your allies. Just be aware of how you gotta play as a tank. You gotta block enemy hits with this ability here, and you gotta consider when to use like Divine Champion. You're gonna use that Divine Champion at the beginning of the fight always. That's just to make sure the enemies are attacking you. It creates this big area around you as well. You can see that, and any enemy within there is going to take damage as per here, and you gain a bonus threat boost, and you'll also automatically block half of the incoming damage rather than needing to use the block. So it's great for when you just run around and you scoop up enemies, make sure they're attacking you, and then you can also use block while that's activated to gain this palisade effect right here, which gives you a boost of 10% damage reduction, and your block goes up to 60% of your max hit points, and you're going to have to learn when to use that depending on the content. And it's usually when you're going to take a tank buster, make sure to activate this and the big shield, and you get that damage resistance and your block is increased. Otherwise, you can use the general Divine Champion just like this to run around, get aggro on enemies, and to just automatically have control immunity and block half the incoming damage on your shield. Now, I do recommend watching gameplay videos on Paladin Tank if you're unsure what abilities to use and when, and particularly the mechanics. You need to learn the mechanics of particularly challenging content so you know what to prepare yourself for. When do you need full HP? When do you need your abilities for a tank buster? Things like that. The latest dungeon is fairly forgiving. You don't really have tank busters. You're just taking a whole lot of damage all the time. So you just gotta sustain that stamina, block as much as you can, and otherwise it can be up to the healer to make sure you're always full HP. But now let's jump to your gear, what I recommend you should be using. We did get some new items with this module, like the Enchanted Depth Forge helmet, and so we can use that for some stamina regen and awareness. It's only really good in long boss fights, so in like multi-target, it can be still recommended to have like the Turban of Shifting Sands there instead. That will just help group up enemies. Or you could use like the Exalted Maidens one for getting extra divinity regen. It's not a big deal what you want to choose there, but that means if we want to use this headpiece, we got to switch a ring over to the Manticore's main bite, as that is a huge bonus for threat. Don't recommend missing it. So we have the Diamond Abyssal Loop. Other than that, we have the new shirt and pants. This creates a set bonus giving 2% defense as well. So we have the shirt giving us a bit of temporary crit avoidance when we get healed in combat. That can trigger off like insignia bonuses, which is great. And then the pants giving us a tiny bit of damage reduction. It's barely noticeable, but those also give us a ton of extra item level. And just be aware that you can absolutely use the legendary variants of this mythic armor just here from the advanced version. And as per my document, you can see right here the different gear locations. You can also use the advanced armor from Lair the Mad Dragon. Not as good as from the Demon Web Pits, but it'll give you that awareness after you take a big hit of like 15% of your hit points. Weapons, you can use Advanced or Master Imperial Citadel Dungeon ones for extra survivability. That's the Void Touched or the Zaraxian ones. And then you've got the feet there from Dragon Slayer, the old boots. You can also have like Wisps of the Shadow Demon. The neck and waist piece, the artifact set basically here, is still what I find the best for survivability. Some people will argue for like the Caldera set, the new one from the new dungeon. But honestly, guys, all you gain is like 70,000 hit points. So this is with the Tiamat set, and then this is with the Caldera set. You notice all you gained was about 70,000 hit points. And that is like a 4% gain to your maximum hit points, which is, in my opinion, not generally going to be worth giving up like 8% damage reduction and 8% critical avoidance. That critical avoidance, despite you basically being maxed out on critical avoidance when the shirt triggers, is still very useful, because whenever you use divinity, you're losing up to 10% of your critical avoidance. So you will need it and you will make use of it, along with just that damage reduction. And it's going to trigger whenever your stamina is low, which should be like most of the time. You should be using that stamina unless you're preparing for a tank buster. So it's going to have a near 50% uptime, which is definitely better than just 70,000 extra hit points. But sure, you can use the Caldera set if you don't have the Tiamat set, or you just like having that extra like 2,500 item level because it looks cool. And for your ring, instead of the diamond abyssal loop ring, make sure you're using a charging bull ring, like the Ring of the Condemned, the Darkleg Ward ring, or the Stalwart Needle ring. They all have the charging bull effect. When you're running for 1 second, you generate threat around you. It's absolutely huge for multi-target, so you can trigger this tab ability. Whenever you go near enemies, you're generating absolute ton of threat on them. You don't need the diamond ring in multi-target, so you can switch to that. But definitely recommend having that Manticore's main bite when you are in those boss fights. It's huge. But overall, again, there's plenty of alternatives you can use, and I have made a gear progression guide. So if you're just starting out the game and you're like, how am I supposed to get all of this great gear? Well, you'll start here and you'll work towards getting the best. So now we'll just quickly cover modifications. So our armor kits and jewels, we just have maximum hit points. We switched out some crit avoidance that we used in the past, and then we just have awareness here on the rings, neck, and the waist. Then we jump to our enchantments, and you can see in defense we have 1 amethyst, 3 jades. Then in utility, we have a cobalt for the incoming healing. We have then fortified nature. It's generally better than what you could potentially have as flash freeze, just because you're gaining those stats pretty reliably when you get hit all the time. And that's in a lot of boss fights, especially when you take damage over time and when you're against lots of mobs. Then we have a movement speed bonus enchantment here, just very useful. But if you don't need movement speed, you can like have a recharge speed or even stamina gain there, but I prefer the movement speed. That's what I go with. For overloads, you're min-maxing for tough content. Get that resiliency of the depths. It works against all damage, not just physical. And then the unholy protection for those stats. For offense, yes, you can have garnets, but just you can have any old spare ones there to work fine. Then for your artifacts, you want to have ideally ones with stamina regen. So we got that new Heart of the Volcano, we got that Scintillant Symbol of Water, we got the Mythallar Fragment. That gives us a total of 45%, but just be aware you can use a lot of the older artifacts to also give that 15% too. We do need the Tiamat's Arcane Globe to complete the set, and as primary we currently have Mythallar. Just be aware you might want to adapt by using a different primary one depending on the group when you're optimizing. You can see where those artifacts come from that I'm currently have slotted. Then we go to our boons, and with our campaign points here, we just get like crit avoidance, HP all the way, get that awareness, get the defense, get the movement speed. Particularly if you're running the new dungeon, get demonic mastery. For advanced boons, we've got the incoming healing. Ideally, we get the rest of stamina regen and forte and action point and recharge speed, but we did prioritize our master boons with blessed resilience, blessed advantage, enhanced application, life lessons, and focused retaliation. You could just avoid getting life lessons. It's mainly there just for the damage, as that's pretty good. The heal on it is absolutely abysmal because our at-will attacks, our actual damage we deal is very tiny. Then for your guild stronghold, get that power, get that awareness, and ideally have revive sickness here if you might die. Otherwise, you can run movement speed in dungeons and mount speed when you can mount up. Now we go to our companions. And as your summoned companion, I'm generally using one that supports the team to increase their damage. But if you really need some extra survivability, there are some useful options like the Angel of Protection, an augment like the Cat or the Winter Fox, just to give you extra stats that you might miss. The Winter Fox is hit points, power, and forte. You can generally fit all of those, even on a build like this where those ratings here are capped out. But then, yeah, you could even use the dedicated Squire, Linu, Lanarel as like healer companions. But again, I generally like to go with one that's going to support the team. Even the Stalwart Lion is going to support the team, but it also has a huge damage reduction effect right here, intercepting 10% of the damage you take. You just got to be right next to him. Like, here's the companion. We got to literally be standing on top of him within this area, and you can see that handshake icon there. You need to have that buff. So it can be not so easy to stand on top of him if he's, say, on the other side of the boss and you can't really move for that. But he is one of the best actually for survivability on a tank. You can see right here a whole load of different active ones you can use to support the team. But as for our equipment, we just got the molten belts of the companion from the Mountain of Flame campaign. We've got then like Redemption here. This is for personal survivability. I do recommend using it if you're like super new and you don't trust your healer, because this heal is pretty huge when you attack. But you may very well want to use team support ones like these ones. They'll increase your team's damage or their survivability. Then we have the equip bonuses here, and Captain Elena Sartell from the previous battle pass is actually pretty huge for heal and damage, but in most cases you might want to have the Raptor here to give them a boost to power. Elena I would use for like personal heal and personal damage. Then we have a Duergar Guard here, the Lich, Myconid, and the Golden Deep Crow. Just be aware, there are lots of alternative ones you can use to give you defensive stats as well. Now we go to our mounts, and this remains pretty much the same, except I believe I now have Survivor's Blessing instead of a second Lionheart's Perseverance. It helps when you deflect, you get a bit of an extra heal. You can see all of the different heal insignia bonuses you can use. They help with, yes, surviving, and also that heal will generate threat too. Be aware there are definitely different ones you can use to support the team, like Allies Resilience and Shepherd's Devotion. Some very nice ones if your team needs those buffs. The insignias themselves, we just have Fortitude and Courage. For the collars, we've got that rough AD and counter power damage, stamina gain, movement speed, but you could have incoming healing here instead, and then critical severity. You could also have like recharge speed here instead as well. For the current page, we're using a combat power to support the team. Not something I would really give up for like a personal thing. You can see all the different ones you can use there. Usually from the Pegasus down to the Bestial Fire Archon, they're like the best. But you can take like Swarm and Eclipse Lion in particular, because they're going to reduce the damage the enemy deals as well. That can add to your own survivability. We then have an aura like Pack Tactics, which will just boost our ratings and our teammates. There is Mystic Aura and Runic Aura you can use as well. Finally, we go to our consumables, and on this setup, we're using nice cheap Caprice. You can potentially use Fizzy Brew instead, but you don't actually need the awareness, at least if you rely on Fortified Nature. We got the chocolate, that does give us awareness rating, and then Elixir of Steadfast Devotion, bit of defense rating and awareness, and then just a potion of deflect. You can have any rolled rank. You can get more expensive ones with more ratings, but it's just min-maxing. It's not really important. For your belt items here, we got a Stone of Health, very useful. You can even use like regenerating healing potions. They can work really well in combination with your lingering medicine there. And then we have Blazing Aegis, pretty much the best belt item right now for tanks. Gives this shield, and then will also deal a bit of reflective damage of your maximum hit points, and then the Empowered Chain of Scales just for that 3% awareness, and you can get a random boost with that too. And that is ultimately the entirety of this build. But let's go to group optimization. So if you want to support the team as best you can, there's plenty of things you can switch around. And I would do this when you're comfortable tanking. And you will see a lot of endgame tanks use these, and you'll just be able to speed up the runs and make them be able to just get completions faster. I would go with an armor piece like the enchanted Bregan one. It can give these AP orbs to give them action points. It can help to make sure they get their daily powers back for every artifact call. Weapons, you can switch to Masterwork ones. There's plenty of different versions like Feywood and Mastered, just to give that 2% damage boost to your team, also giving them 2% damage reduction. You can use an artifact set like Vistani or Marilith or even Apocalypse, and this will just give an extra damage boost based on those effects. You can see that with Vistani, you'll increase the target's damage taken by 5%. It's great. You ideally want to have somebody in the group using it, so potentially you could. Just be aware you don't also use it as well as the healer. Only have one person on this. Otherwise, you could very readily use Marilith instead or Apocalypse. You can switch your aura over to like Aura of Wrath, giving them extra crit strike, 4%, very nice. Again, be sure to use a support companion like Dreads, Tutor, Portobello, anything that the team kind of needs to increase their damage. Make sure you're using an enhancement here like Armor Break, Vulnerability, Dulled Senses. They'll all increase the damage against the target, and you can read through all of the different ones here. Also making sure to have that Tamed Raptor if your team is using a Raptor builds. And yes, using the Grace Ring can help too. It's pretty much got the same trigger rate as the Vistani set, so they work very well together. But yeah, you are giving up like the Topaz Ring, which can be a significant survivability boost if you don't use your daily power a lot. Particularly on Paladin, you'll generally save it for like a tank buster, and in some content you just don't have any tank busters, and so you just end up not using your daily power. And so this is a very, very nice effect. If you do find yourself using your daily power a lot and you're in content where you can stand around a bit, potentially switch to the Malachite ring, giving that awareness and stamina regen after you stand still for 6 seconds. But overall, that's the entirety of the build and setup. It's very similar to my Module 28 build, and this will be the build most likely used moving forward to Module 30. We'll see if we actually get any useful items there or not. But in order to, say, complete the next trial or dungeon, we don't really know what's coming out, you're gonna have to, of course, start out with this kind of gear, unless we can get some stuff, say, just from the campaign. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated, but if you don't see like a new Module 30 build pushed out like very quickly within the next module, then that's probably because there's not many options to actually switch to. And again, you're above 100,000 item level, which will be enough to get into the next latest endgame content. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. A special thank you to all these channel members for their added support. And if this was somewhat insightful, consider leaving the video a like. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.